Okay, I just got my truck back from my work. I was working on it for 2 weeks, changing the intake manifold gasket, just leaking coolant. And I accidentally broke the oil pressure sending unit on the back of the head, or back of the engine block behind the distributor. And I ordered the right part for it, and I got the wrong part, and I had to reorder the part, and then I couldn't get it out because it was stuck in there, and it just took a long time to do. I had to change the distributor and a bunch of other stuff while I was at it, but now there's no more misfire, now there's no more coolant leak. Now back to having a good truck again. Now I get a bunch of people asking me, how does it handle without the sway bar? How does it handle without a track bar? Is my stock steering box good enough? Well, I'll try to answer some of those questions today because I keep having to probably type the same answer over and over. The plan is to do hydro assist steering. What I ended up doing is I got a PSC big bore steering box, which you can't see right now because I put the trim panel back on. Let me see here. It's the PSC big bore steering box, which has a slower ratio, and it's pre-drilled and tapped for a hydro assist ram. And you can see it looks completely different. It's got a 6-bolt cap instead of a 4-bolt cap on the top. So that's what I'm rocking for power steering box since the original sector shaft bearing was shot. I'm using the factory power steering box, power pump and reservoir because I have a hydro boost system, and I didn't really have the money at the time to go ahead and just do the full hydro assist with the remote reservoir and everything, because it is a lot of money. This steering box was $900, and then I think the rest of the parts to complete the kit is another $700 or $800. The reservoir and the pump and all the hoses for the hydro boost kit, because you got all these power steering lines coming up here as well. Then I have to find a place to mount the reservoir because, you know, I got my windshield wiper motor there. But anyway, that's a problem for later. I guess I could put the reservoir in here because I don't have a second battery, even though I wanted to run dual battery. But anyway, that's the setup. It's just a crossover steering link, one high steer arm basically, and a drag link that comes across, which I have the tire on, so it's kind of hard to see, but there it is. And it works well for what it is, but there is some give in the leaf springs side to side. So there's a little bit of initial turn in, about, I don't know, a degree or so, where you turn the wheel and it doesn't respond. It's not a dead spot. It starts to turn in, but what it means is you have to turn the wheel more than you would. It's not like it's loose. Kind of hard to describe, so I just got to show you what I did. Some people will hate it when you get used to it. I'm thinking of putting a track bar on here just because I spend a lot of time on the pavement. That would really tighten up the steering. I'll have less initial turning. It does work well. If that had a track bar on it, it would not have that give in the leaf spring side to side. But for now, it'll do fine. Putting this in 4-wheel drive is just like any other old Ford truck. Other than that, because I still have the automatic transfer case, even though I lock the hubs, you know, drive forward and backwards to make sure that they're locked in. And the transfer case is automatic. I I'm gonna change this later because this is not ideal. I've already bumped it by accident a couple times. But at least you have peace of mind knowing that if your hubs are unlocked, it's never gonna actually put power to the tires and you're never gonna bind it up on the street. But it works. That's just with the actuator zip tied off to the side of the frame there. If you don't have the actuator hooked up, this will not shift. So you can't throw away that actuator off the front IFS diff. Your transfer case will no longer work. So it's easiest just to leave it hooked up to the harness and tuck it in the frame somewhere. Last weekend I did some long overdue work on here, which was make some brackets to put bump stops on this truck. I also replaced the temporary lower shock tabs I had on here with some nice OE Ford style, I don't know what you call them, the bolt with the bracket like this, because before I had this bushing turn 90 degrees with a tab on each side. Well, when the suspension cycles up and down, there's not a lot of rotation with the leaf springs. It kind of just stays square because it bends equally in the front and rear. There might be a small arc, but it's nothing. When it flexes side to side, that's when you get the big degree change. So that's why I put the lower shock tabs like this, because that's where the rotation is like that mostly instead of like this. So hopefully that lets the bushing last longer. This oil soak here, unfortunately my booster and master cylinder were leaking, and this was only primered because I wasn't done with this truck yet. I just had to get it out of the shop and drive it. So that'll get painted later because I'm still not sure. I'm probably going to make a mount for this reservoir over here and weld it on the frame, because when I flex it out the other way, when the tire comes up all the way and you turn it lock to lock, it slightly rubs this guy, so I don't want it to rip them off. But my drive line, I had it up on the lift this weekend, and you just start to see the splines come out. You see about 1/8 of an inch of splines, with the suspension totally drooped on the shocks as low as they go, and then the drive shaft doesn't bind, which is nice. I think this is a 1330 CV. I mean, I know it is. I couldn't fit a 1350. I mean, I might be able to, but it's like really freaking close, like that close to the NP243. Because it's got the electric shifter on the side of it. If you had a 241, I think you wouldn't have a problem getting a 1350 CD up there. But I'm running 1330 joint down here, and up at the CD up there is a 1330. So that's how I was able to get a drive line on this, because I actually did have a little bit of trouble. Let's see if you can see. The drive line was that way, because this pinion is over further than the IFS one. So if you had a 32.5 inch spring pad Dana 60, like off of a 1978 F350, you wouldn't have any of that weird driveline extra angle, because, you know, the compound angle, because it's going up and over, it would be just straight. And when I had my Dana 44 high pinion off an F250 in 1978, on my half-ton Chevy that I straight axled, the driveline was straight. I didn't have this problem. I never had to run a CV up there. I just had a regular drive shaft. But that's how the exhaust is routed. I had to have this redone twice because I told him to hug the transmission the first time, the exhaust guy, and he did what he thought was hugging the transmission, but it really needed to go up. So he put it like a double, triple bend up there, because the drive shaft did contact it at Hollister Hills and it bent it, and it caused an exhaust leak up there at the gasket. It crushed it. But he fixed it for me. So now it works nice. And the bump stops, you can see, I guess it's been working slightly right here. Just kissing the frame. Just totally flexed out. It's not touching the bump stop to the frame, even though it's totally flexed out right now. Let's see. Like, it's really close. It's hard to get the camera in there. And you can see there the reservoir on the shock is like dangerously close to the crossover steering arm on the knuckle. So that's why I want to relocate the reservoirs. Tie rod's still bent because, you know what, it's in alignment right now. You're probably going to do total heist here. But it's nice because I can tuck the tire up there with the 35. It's only trimmed on the front bumper, and it's only trimmed in the back of the wheel well right there. You can see that angle cut. And then the plastic flare is cut as well. That's the only trimming that was needed to be done to clear. So, my gosh, it's windy. I get in the truck and answer some of the FAQs. Okay, FAQ time. What did you do to bypass the front axle actuator and the ABS system? Well, the front axle actuator, the center axle disconnect actuator, is still there. It's still hooked up to the harness, but it's not installed to anything. It's just zip tied on the inside of the frame. What did I do to bypass the ABS system? I removed the fuse for the ABS. Since it no longer has wheel speed sensors, the ABS system will no longer work. And usually they don't work any good with a lift and bigger tires anyway. So I just took the ABS fuse out. The lights on the dash doesn't bother me. I don't like ABS anyways. What size tires are you running? They're 35 inches tall, but they're actually 3, 15, 75, 16. Would you say the truck drives smoother than stock suspension? The front is softer, but that's probably only because I have the sway bar not installed on the vehicle. If you want a softer ride on a stock truck, you can remove the front sway bar, but you just got to keep in mind that it will handle differently. I mean to put a front sway bar on this truck, but the stock one will no longer work, and the stock one's too stiff anyways for my liking. I want to get one of those Curry anti-rock sway bars, the tunable ones that you don't have to disconnect. They're a little bit softer and they have longer travel than the OEM style. That way I don't break any links and I don't have to disconnect it before I go off-roading. How does it drive on the road without any sway bars? Is it daily drivable? Well, I drive it, but not daily. You know, I would daily it if it was my only vehicle. If it was my only vehicle, I'd put a sway bar on it. When you tow with the truck, I've towed it many times, pulling cars and my Jeep and whatnot. When the back springs get on the overloads there, the helper leaf springs, it really stiffens up the ride and levels it out because those springs, they're pretty stiff in the back. And I haven't really needed a front sway bar when I'm towing. The front sway bar would be nice, you know, on a windy road like the one I'm on right now. But yeah, just don't plan on it handling awesome. It's gonna be more top heavy and softer suspension, so more body roll than stock with the lift. Did you run into any problems with your swap? Yes. Getting a front driveline that would fit was a little bit of a challenge. I had to reinvent the wheel almost because everyone I talked to who did a straight axle swap on this had a different transfer case, and they could run a 1350 CV or they had a flange already on it. So I ended up running a 1330 CV, and it fit and it clears, and South Bay Driveline ended up building it for me, and I'm very happy with it. The other problem I had was the exhaust clearance. The driver's side exhaust pipe that crosses over underneath the bell housing of the transmission You need to cut that off, and you need to make the highest clearance one possible. You get it real tucked in as close as you can to the bell housing, because otherwise the front driveline will contact it when you flex it out. What did you run for brake lines? I use the Off-Road Design brake lines they have for straight axle swaps. It's on their website. How much did it cost? Well, I did all the work myself, and I added up all the receipts. $10,412.89 without the tires. You really get nickeled and dimed on all the little stuff. Really adds up. What's a fair price to pay to have someone straight axle your truck? Well, it took me over 100 hours of labor and about 10,000 in parts. And if they charge about $100 an hour labor, that's about $10,000 of labor. So around $20,000, $25,000 is probably what you pay a shop to do all this work for you, maybe more, probably 30. You can still see I haven't replaced this tie rod, and the dumb story behind this getting bent was I had a block of wood under the axle tube and I was jacking it up. And you know how those jacks, when you go up with them, they move and you're supposed to roll with the wheels? Well, the wheels were digging into the asphalt and it wasn't rolling. So what happened is the jack just slipped back off of the block, and then the block teetered up like this, and all the weight of the suspension, the whole front of the truck fell on the tie rod and it bent it up like this. So I bent it back best I could. It was pretty disappointing because that was the same weekend I put the steering stabilizer on, which I never fully painted because it was temporary. You can see I welded a tab on.